YouTube.com. Gonna go to youtube.com and gonna check out the current live streams. Okay.
I would advise viewers to note Steven's chippiness as a sign of something.
Yeah, I'm not usually this giddy.
No, he's not. Something's coming.
No, he's not. Talking about me like in third person.
Never in a podcast.
All right. Pixel 4 leaks go nuclear. Apple announcements and Nest Mini are our topics for the day.
Yeah. I'm going to make a prediction on this episode that the invites for the Made by Google 2019 are going to come sometime during this podcast.
I'd say there's a 50% chance of that happening, probably.
Yes, because they're quite delayed. Well, not delayed, but it should have happened by now.
Well, I'm sure some people are tuning in and curious. Hey, Elliot. Hey, Creative Solutions. What's up? Curious about my little teasy face on Twitter. And that's too bad because I'm not going to tell you anything about it. And I can't because you got to respect your sources. And if your sources haven't said that you can share things, then you don't share them. So I'm not going to say anything. I will say one thing, and this is going to let people down, but I will say one thing, and that is that it is not related to the Pixel 4.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, what else do people want to know about the Pixel 4? There's nothing.
Right. So let's talk about that to start the show off as people are starting to come in. The Pixel 4 leaked like crazy this week. And I guess we can go back to less than 24 hours after our last episode of Alphabet Scoop. I posted an opinion piece. And this piece may have aged worse than every other article that has ever been posted on 9 to 5 Google. And I'm kind of okay with that. It was titled, bear with me a moment, it was titled, Comment, Fewer Leaks and Far Less Hype. Is that bad news for the Pixel 4? And basically, it came out of me realizing and thinking just that the Pixel 3 leaked so much more than the Pixel 4. It really just depends on your perspective on that, because things are going to change in the next few weeks, I'm sure. With the Pixel 4, and even more than they have this week, which is to say they've changed dramatically. But my piece was basically just saying, Pixel 3 leaked a lot. It drummed up a lot of hype in the media, and it drummed up a lot of hype on YouTube among a select number of YouTubers who were kind of taking it and run with it. I think last year we saw that the Pixel 4 or Pixel 3, Pixel 3 had. It was really, really like the YouTube algorithm was really friendly to the Pixel 3 last year, I think. So I guess that I just didn't feel like that was happening this year, and we hadn't seen any leaks of the phone in the hand, like actually unboxed, and like videos on YouTube, and some things that we had seen at the end of September last year, or the end of August last year, I should say, just weren't happening yet. And so it just felt like to me that Pixel hype in general was down. I tweeted, is Pixel hype at an all-time low? And I think a lot of the consensus was, yeah. I mean,
but by
a lot
design,
of people were saying, yeah.
It's the key change here is that Google decided to embrace the leakiness. And yes, there was no third-party leaks, but for most people, I think that the first-party ones that Google issued, the one on what the back looks like and rate the front via way of Soli and Face Unlock was really enough to tie them over till when Google actually decides to launch the thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of part of the point of my post was, I mean, I guess at the time I was asking, did Google coming out and sharing actual images of the Pixel 4 so early? I mean, that was back in June, right?
Yeah.
And talking about the features later, was that potentially having an impact on the leak cycle? And I think now we know the answer, and the answer is definitely no. But last week we didn't know the answer, and I think that I was kind of speculating perhaps that Google coming out with those images and stuff. I wondered if maybe Google was hoping that would put a little bit of a, I don't know, a little bit of a damper on the whole leak cycle, because I think part of what drives the leak cycle is I think some leakers, and I think some. I mean, obviously, money is a big part of it. YouTubers are just vying for attention and ad revenue, and there's obviously that. And I think just like a lot of leakers just get a rush from leaking things that aren't out yet. And I think I kind of was of the opinion last week that perhaps Google coming out and just sharing things straight up about the Pixel 4, that element of it might be dampened down because maybe people would just be less interested, or the drive just wouldn't be there to kind of push the snowball down the hill, as it were. So I guess, though, what we found out was the answer to that question, which was, well, I don't know. Maybe we didn't. Maybe I'm wondering now, like maybe my post had something to do with the fact that all these. I mean, because like after my post last Friday, we immediately went into Friday alone. After that post, it kind of started. Like almost immediately, like within an hour after that post, I had 2 scoops related to the camera and some other things with the Pixel 4, and that just was the start of this huge avalanche of leaks. So, do you want to just get into those first couple leaks that we had last week?
Yeah. So I think the most personally, and maybe I'm a bit biased here, but our 2 leaks about the camera features, which are it's a Pixel phone. Everybody loves the camera and interested in what the camera does. And we learned that Google is doing this motion mode and my personal favorite, astrophotography, as part of an improved night sight. So this astrophotography it's basically you can take pictures of the night sky and see the stars perfectly. Night sight right now is very good close to Earth on objects in the near distance, but what Google is doing with astrophotography, and we've seen this in a later leak of this promo video, is Google's literally letting you take pictures of the night sky in a clear field or whatever. And I think that's the wow moment that, if anything, Google wished was kept a secret. If last year's night sight clapping and cheer was an indication, so that might be the stunner.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. I think there's a big difference between what most I guess technologically savvy people would care about when it comes to leaks, and then there's another aspect of things that it's like, what would Google care about whether or not it leaks, right? And I think that Google probably doesn't care at all about the fact that the fact that it has 6 gigs of RAM leaked out, right? They don't care about that, but I think a lot of tech heads really do. Like that's a big significant factor for them, because it's like, oh well, if the Pixel 4 had 4 gigs of RAM again, there's no way I'm getting that phone. And so the amount of memory on the phone is obviously a big deal for some people, but not Google. Google, on the other hand, might care about things that other people don't really care so much about. I mean, I think to some people, slightly improved night sight that can take photos of stars, that might be kind of not so big a deal. That's not really a deal breaker for whether or not they buy the phone, and it's not the number one thing they're looking out for when it comes to leaks. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head that this is the kind of thing that Google would care about. This is the kind of thing that would stand out in the keynote. They're not going to brag about the fact that the Pixel 4 has 6 gigs of RAM. They're going to brag about the fact that the Pixel 4 can take pictures of the moon and of the stars, just better than any other phone. And that's going to get a lot of claps, and it's going to allow a lot of, appreciation from the audience and from, frankly, just normal people. I think another thing was call screen last year. That was one of those things that was a big just wow moment for people, hot on the heels of Duplex earlier that year. But another thing, or was it the year before?
No, it was fast.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, so another thing was that I posted about beyond these two camera features, one being motion mode, which is basically just being able to take motion photos, not motion photos, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Photos in motion, like sports and action clips, and then the improved night sight thing. The other thing I shared was this feature that's kind of sort of related to call screen, just sort of indirectly. And it's a new feature that apparently Google's working on that will allow you to basically, my sources told me it may be called, it's still TBD, but it may be called Hold My Phone, which it's not an awful name, but I also can't think of a better name, so
Yeah.
whatever. But basically what it allows you to do is if you're on the phone with a business or something and you're sitting on hold and there's elevator music playing in the background, you'll be able to basically just, click a button on the screen and it'll, I assume, you just listen for the music, and whenever the music stops and it hears a voice again, then it's going to send a notification to your phone.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to, just pick it back up. And so basically, I mean, you'll be able to just put your phone down when you're on hold and get a notification whenever you're no longer on hold. So that's a pretty cool feature. And I also think that is very much the kind of feature that Google would have hoped to not leak and have a chance to, talk about on the stage at the event next month. So
yeah, that was your two big software-based features, which are usually the very last thing to leak, but not this year. We still have a month. And so over the weekend, Friday
and then the flood began.
hardware. So I guess the consensus is Google switching production to Vietnam, to Southeast Asia, has resulted in all these leaks of people having the Pixel 4. It looks to be the Pixel 4 XL, and just setting it up and using it exactly like the Ukrainian leakers last year. And so 6 gigs of RAM, like you said. We got Qualcomm Snapdragon 855, another obvious addition. On the camera front, we see this new camera UI. Google every year, for whatever reason, they love to tweak the design of the Google Camera app. And this year's primary change is a pretty good one. It's now more full screen. You get the entire real estate, the slide, the carousel to switch modes between night sight, video, portrait, etc. is moved to the very bottom of the screen, and everything else is just a viewfinder. It really plays well to minimizing everything, so it's a good look. The camera itself, we learned, has 8x zoom between the two cameras, the telephoto and the standard. And that's I think there's still something that Google is doing with telephoto that will finally find that on stage, but it's clear that I think they have a story to tell behind that particular lens they chose and why they didn't go with wide angle, as I guess some people are, especially after the iPhone event, advocating more for.
Yeah, there's actually a really interesting note on that point, and it's something that actually John Gruber mentioned in his thoughts on the iPhone event this week, which was kind of considering the reasons why Apple, after doing dual cameras for the longest time on an iPhone, meant the regular wide angle and then the telephoto, and considering why they would have decided to switch that up with the iPhone 11. So the iPhone 11 is also a dual camera, but Google or Apple decided to do the wide and the ultra wide now, versus the wide and the telephoto, as Admir just mentioned, which is an interesting decision because that's a change since the iPhone 7, 7 Plus, I should say. But John Gruber made a pretty good point where he said that thinking about it, in terms of like looking forward, it makes more sense to do a wide angle as a dual camera as the second lens, because there are ways in which you can do digital zoom computationally. Obviously, Google started that with super res zoom last year, and we're seeing it done by a lot of other phone makers. But you can't do ultra wide computationally.
No.
And so that's actually a valid point, and I've never thought about that before. Which, like I was always advocating for the second lens on the Pixel 4 to be a telephoto, but now I'm having second thoughts because I think it makes sense to do the second lens wide angle because Google's super res zoom is so good that I feel like they don't even need the telephoto. And having the ultra wide would be really nice. But I guess the counter is that Google could do something even crazier with super res zoom with the addition of telephoto.
I think Google, as a collection of geeks and sci-fi enthusiasts, enhance is a very common trope in sci-fi. And if they manage to do something that cool when they announce a phone, that might be something. That's another clap-worthy moment. So that's the camera. So colors. So that's what we leaked over the weekend. We were wondering what the third color was. There was always obviously going to be black with a lighter lock button, and there was always obviously going to be white with an orange power button. But coral is the third color that Google. It's the fun color that Google is going this year, and I'm very happy about this. I'm very happy that Google is finally doing a bold color, as I've been advocating for since the original Pixel with the very blue. So I think this is the year that a lot of people might get the crazy bold color.
Yeah, I mean, it is. We heard from a source that there was actually an internal Pixel 2 that was red.
Yes,
redder than the not pink of the
much.
three.
Not pink.
I read enough that we actually heard that Google at one point had considered it, and this was earlier on in Google's relationship with Verizon, that Google was considering launching a red Pixel 2 exclusive to Verizon, which would make sense given that Verizon is the red carrier. So, but yeah, this looks to be kind of like the boldest color that they've done, maybe except for the really blue of the original Pixel. This might be the second boldest color. And I don't know. I feel like one of the things that I've really liked about the way Google has done colors, with the kind of blue and the not pink, purplish. Yeah, those are three. I really like that they've been subtle. I like that because this is why I feel like if they're subtle, then it's not really that big of a decision between for me at least. And I'm thinking about the Pixel 3, for example. It's not a huge decision between getting the white one or getting the not pink one. I feel like I could easily use either of them. And I don't feel like I'm making some kind of statement about me as a person by choosing one or the other. Whereas with the bold red versus the white versus the new Panda 2.0, I feel like those are three very different colors, and you really are making a bold choice, regardless of which color you get. I liked the purplish. Like, I loved that color because it's not really purple. It is purplish, and so it's purple, but it's not like, I feel like I can hold it out in public and people won't take note of the fact that I'm holding a purple phone. Yeah, exactly.
Now, I refuse to believe this is purple. This is forever eggshell white in my book. It's not purple enough, Google.
But yeah, I mean, so that's my thought on it. I can see why people would want the bold, but I mean, another example of this is the new iPhone 11 Pro Midnight Green, where it's not really green.
Yeah, it's pastel-y.
It's off gray, and it's off in the green direction, and that's why I would like that one too. So yeah, I mean, and black obviously is a neutral color that anyone can use, and it always has been the default going back to the original cell phones. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if I want the red one. If it was more subtle, then maybe. But I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't know
So,
if I'm really into the coral, the dark coral, whatever it
so
is.
I think a month away, so the panda one or the penguin one, because that's a more accurate representation, and pandas don't have bits of orange on them. Penguins do. That obviously is going to sell out. That is, I'm sure, compared judging from the Pixel 2 last year, it's going to be a sellout. And I think that's the color people are going to. And I guess I'm curious whether people will just go whether the second choice will be black or this coral color. So it'll be interesting to track what Google runs out of first. But it'll also be super interesting if Google ever release color breakdowns as percentages on their phones. If every manufacturer did that, frankly, that'd be an interesting case study.
Hmm. Well, let's talk about some other things that leaked. We also saw pretty much confirmations of everything that's already leaked. I mean, most recently we've seen these videos come out of Vietnam and Thailand, I think, kind of a mix of both, that have shown, basically hands-on footage, and it's like pretty high resolution too. Like this
Yeah,
is pretty much on par with the Ukrainian reviews and leaks that happened in late August last year.
kind of great variety. I must
Sure,
note.
sure, yeah, and there's really nothing. There's not very many stones left unturned with these videos, I don't think. Um, it's almost hard to talk about them because we already knew most of it, but it's just these videos are just really high resolution footage of the phones.
Yeah,
Um, and it's just crazy. Like it seems like, I mean, we still have 4 weeks, maybe more, to go before the event, and the phone's already leaked in its entirety, just like it did last year. So I feel like I mean, at the end of the day, after this week, I really have to just walk back everything I said in that opinion piece, which is that, I mean, Pixel 4 officially caught up. I think I'm going to write that. I'm going to write that piece tomorrow. Keep an eye out for it, but it's going to be something along the lines of, thanks for all the leaks. We're good now. We don't need any more. That's going to be headlines. Going to be
yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, were there any other like minor details? I mean, we saw the motion sense settings in one
Motion
leak.
sense. Yeah. So it looks like, as Google promised, the initial three features at launch will be skipping music, pausing alarms, and doing the same for phone calls, I believe. But it's just basic interactions. That, in the grand scheme of things, especially with music, they're very broad actions. They're just very general. You're going left or you're going right. So I guess what I'm curious in seeing in the future is Google opening up to more fine-tuned commands, like the promise, the original vision of Zoe they laid out. But again, that's something hopefully Google releases an SDK for third-party developers to experiment.
Sure.
But smooth display was the smooth display was another thing we saw. 90 hertz confirmation. Google warns of higher battery usage with the screen adjusting between 60 and 90. I know you're very curious to get your hands on that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just a matter of the smoothness with scrolling in apps, and I don't know. You just get so spoiled using the ProMotion on the iPad Pro that it just makes any other phone feel like a laggy mess.
So do you think it's
It's one
going
of
to
those things that you can't go back after you do it. So use it.
how much do you think it'll help with Android's underlying issues?
Which underlying issues? There's lots of them.
The smoothness in comparison to iOS, any
Yeah,
iOS
I don't
device.
think I don't think that that's I don't think that it will really affect that,
Yeah.
because the smoothness thing exists, and I think it doesn't. I don't think it really has anything to do with the smoothness of the refresh rate of the display. I think it more has to do with like human interface design guidelines, and obviously Google is a lot less stringent on that on that than Apple is. So yeah, I don't really think it'll have an effect. If anything, and this is the pessimistic view, is that if anything, 90 hertz display will only accentuate even more
Ooh,
the ways
jaggedness.
in which, because I don't think it is a matter of the display refresh rate. I think it's an OS level thing and a design level thing. So, and maybe, I mean, maybe even a kind of a just lack of unity among just human interface design across third-party applications. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to affect things, but I don't think it'll make anything better on that front. But I also don't think that most people care or even know what I'm talking about when I talk about these things, because it's such a nitpick, I think. So, I mean, I also wanted to talk about on motion sense. I think one thing we're learning from this leak is I would guess that they're going to call motion sense on the spec sheet based on this. I think Soli name / brand is going to go away with this launch. Well, maybe not for the project, but for the
on this
phone.
Pixel
I don't think that Google's going to say introducing Pixel 4 with Project Soli on board, the Soli radar chip. Or, I mean, maybe if you ask them, what's the hardware? Obviously, they're not going to hide the fact that it is a radar chip that is known as Soli. But I think on the spec sheet, we're going to see the word motion sense. We're not going to see Soli. And that's how. I mean, it's the same thing as like Pixel Imprint. That's a branded hardware feature that is on the spec sheet. The spec sheet doesn't say the specification of what kind of fingerprint sensor the Pixel has. It just says Pixel Imprint, and I think that's the kind of thing. I think that's what they're going to do with the Soli sensor.
Yeah. So touching on a handful of more features, just today we saw the Pixel Themes app, which basically brings together the existing customization options, which are buried throughout the system and settings and developer options to change icon shape, accent color, that kind of stuff. Looks to be a bit straightforward, but it's always nice for Google to bring it into one place. We saw this attention feature where basically during the Android Q beta 4, I believe, there were some details, but if you look, as long as you're looking at the screen, the phone won't shut it off. This phone and screen won't shut it off. According to those previous strings, it's based on camera, which I'm curious if that's still the case with Soli, because I guess Soli doesn't look at your eyes, does it? But I'm curious how they're going to do that. Implement a camera-based feature to make it not as intensive. But that's a minor thing that I'm interested in exploring. We saw how face unlock works, or the setup process. It's not too different from Face Match,
Face
Match on the Nest Hub Max, which did launch this week, and of course Face ID, which was first. And yeah, that's basically it this week. I am curious to our audience, what else do you want to know about this phone?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you have any thoughts on that, leave them in the comments, and maybe we'll address them in next show. And maybe someone will even send us some information on those. One person asked, why are they using the black frame in all three colors? That's a good question, and I've thought about that too, which is like, I don't know. It looks pretty. It's pretty bold to have the solid black around every single color.
I don't think they can match the glass back with the frame, is my hunch or something, to make it look nice. I don't think they can properly do that or something.
Yeah, I don't really know the true answer to this. One of the interesting things that we've heard about the phone, one of the Vietnamese leakers, I believe, said that that the texture of the rail, and I guess in this case it really is. I mean, it seems like it's like almost like one of those old iPhone bumpers. It's kind of a true kind of rail around the edge of the phone.
Yeah.
Apparently, the texture of that is very similar to the back of the Pixel 2 XL. So it's kind of this painted aluminum kind of feeling that's like it kind of gives you the sense of it's very clearly metal, but it also kind of is textured and rough a little bit, like sanded.
Yeah.
Feels a little bit. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
So it's so smudgy on it gets so very smudgy. But that being said, I would much prefer that texture to the glossy on the Pixel 3, which feels very plasticky. Doesn't even look like metal. The Google's decision to coat it last year was my least favorite part of the phone. So I think this is a good turnaround. This is a good turnaround in going with a texture that they know how to work with even more. So
Yeah, you didn't like the smooth of the Pixel 3?
no, because it feels cheap. It feels very cheap.
Yeah.
Even the actual plastic of the Pixel 3a feels much better than this painted metal frame.
Here's one thing I'm super bummed about, and that is that the etched glass, matte glass of last year's phone is gone. It seems like,
Yeah.
and that is such a bummer. Like, that was one of my favorite aspects of the phone last year, and it's kind of, I mean, angers me a little bit that they got rid of that.
I think to most people holding it in stores, it felt very cheap. I didn't think they appreciated it was glass.
Well, then explain how the new $1,000 and up to $1,500 iPhone 11 Pro and Pro Max are both embracing the etched matte glass finish of the Pixel 3.
Apple never asks its customer opinion. That's my answer.
I don't know. I think it feels really premium. I think it's really nice, and
yeah, I agree. I
think Apple agrees.
But people literally like shiny things. That is a human nature.
The other possibility, I mean, one thing we haven't talked about, and this is one of the very, very few things about the Pixel 3 or Pixel 4. Man, I just cannot get them straight today. Pixel 4 has not leaked, and that's the price. We don't know where Google is going to position these in the market.
Yeah.
Are they going to put it at $699 and go really bold and against the iPhone 11? Or is it going to be somewhere? I mean, really, the only two options, in my opinion, are they're going to be really aggressive and go $699 versus the iPhone 11, or it'll be somewhere in between the iPhone 11 and the iPhone 11 Pro, which would put it in line with where the prices were at last year. Which the prices were never really $799. Last year, the prices started at $799. They never really were, because even a month or two after, they got dropped to $699 or $599, and now it's like buy one get one half off, and it's like, or right now it's $300 off just straight. I think
it's $499.
It's just $499, like with it's just $499. So it's like, are they going to be more realistic about the pricing this year and not cut them like immediately and piss all the first day adopters off? I think $699 right there with the iPhone 11
would be higher.
Would be aggressive, and it would also be realistic. I think they would be able to hold that price a bit better than they were able to hold $799.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm optimistic to think that they will do that, but that's what I'm kind of hoping.
I think you can safely say that like the hardware components on this phone seem to be more expensive. There's literally one more camera. There's one more sensor.
Yeah, but none of that really has anything to do with how Google prices phone, or really many manufacturers price phones. I mean, I think all you have to do is look at the first 3 years of Pixel to see that the phones were not priced based on the hardware components. Because if they were, they would have been cheaper. Because, I mean, in terms of the sheer cost of the hardware, I'm pretty sure every single year that the Samsung Galaxy S line is more expensive than the Pixel, probably by a decent margin. And yet the Pixel has been, the same price or even more expensive, I think.
$649. It was $640. Yeah.
But anyways, you get my point, is that Google has priced these at a premium regardless. And I think that they're also real. I mean, there's value that the Pixel brings that other phones don't bring. And so I think I don't part of me doesn't blame them for that. I mean, you're not really whenever you buy a phone, you're not really buying hardware specs. You're buying whatever that phone has to offer, and especially with things Google's doing with software and the camera. You know, the Pixel was a unique, I guess, a unique product. And so, yeah, and the fact that I think Google just wanted, another aspect that goes into pricing is Google wanted to paint an image of what this phone is and who it's aimed at, and some veneer of premium. And I think that was another aspect. And competitiveness with, I guess, the premium level pricing of the iPhone. I mean, yeah, pricing the regular Pixel 3 higher than the iPhone XR last year, you know, like that's a little bit egregious in my opinion. But I don't know. It's just all that to say, I think that you can't really look at how much more expensive the hardware components are going to be this year versus last year to predict pricing. So, I mean, obviously there's some correlation there, but with Google especially, it seems to be that there's not as much as some others. I would guess that they're going to go $699. I think that the Pixel 4, small Pixel 4, is going to go $699 and compete right against the iPhone 11. If Google were smart, I think that's what they would do, because I really don't think that they can. I think that pricing it higher than the iPhone 11 is, it makes the iPhone look like a way better value. Whether or not it is a whole other conversation. But the iPhone 11 being $100, say they priced it the same way they priced the Pixel 3, and Pixel 4 is $799. That makes the iPhone 11 look a really good deal.
Yeah, and people understand value as a factor that goes into their buying decisions.
Sure. And I also think that Google's realistic about the fact that these can't really compete side by side with the Pros, the 11 Pros. I don't know.
I promise you that the camera if they do another camera preview, it will be 11 Pro Max, and that's the discussion. That's the level they want to be playing at. Sure.
Yeah. No. There's no denying that. At least on the camera front.
But everything else.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if at the event they show a side-by-side Pixel 4 on the left and iPhone 11 Pro on the right, and it's very clear that the Pixel 4 is better with some kind of night mode or something. Like, that would be, that would not be surprising at all to me. But I think the pitch will be more so, look what you can get for so much less than Apple's egregiously priced iPhone 11 Pro. I think there will be some kind of messaging around how, I mean, it's been really interesting to see how Apple, really 90% of what they used to justify the Pro name was the cameras. And it'll be, I think a lot of Google's messaging this year will be, yeah, you're calling your phone Pro. Our non-Pro phone that costs $699 or $799 or whatever they decide to do, outperforms your professional level product. I think that's going to be part of the messaging. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, that's Pixel 4. I think we're going to definitely see more leaks in the next 7 days. It's pretty safe to say, because they've been pretty much daily at this point. So stay tuned. I'm sure we'll start hearing more about prices, and hopefully we will find out about an actual launch date or announcement date sometime in the next couple of days, with Google sending out event invites. So yeah, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about, I guess, we've been kind of talking about the iPhone or the Apple event a little bit here and there, but I also did a post kind of about just the ways that Google could be targeting iPhone upgraders this year. And I kind of talked about some software things, which we haven't really talked about, that are not necessarily Pixel exclusive or Pixel 4 exclusive. They may also come to Pixel 3. Obviously, I talked about the cameras. We already talked a lot about that. But another thing I talked about was Assistant. And Assistant is looking like it's going to be one of the big, again, this year, going to be a really big selling point with the Pixel 4. And a lot of these features are probably coming to the Pixel 3 as well. But amazingly, at Apple's event this week, there was not a single mention of Siri, besides just slides in the background. There was not a single mention of Siri, and I think that really highlights just how far behind Apple is on that. I think what Apple tends to do when they sense that they're behind on something is they just avoid talking about it at all costs.
Yeah.
Like they haven't really highlighted. I don't know.
They haven't.
They haven't talked anything about Siri since Siri shortcuts was announced, and even that was kind of a concession and not really. I feel like the fact that Siri shortcuts exists is kind of a concession of, yeah, we're a bit behind, so we're just going to let you do some of the things that Google Assistant can do out of the box. We're going to let you do them manually by programming your phone.
8 macros, guys. Good job.
Yeah. So, I mean, we know with Pixel 4 that it's going to bring the next generation assistant, which we kind of had a little bit of an internal debate about that. What do you think about calling it the next generation assistant? Do you think that's an apt description, or do you think that it's a little bit much for what Google's doing?
An apt description when we see it on other phones, and how soon we'll see it on other phones, the majority of Android phones. So Google has obviously only announced the Pixel 4, and I would not be surprised if it stays exclusive to the Pixel 4 till the end of the year, or at least until the next generation of Android phones. So I think it's next gen when everybody has it, but until then, yeah, it's cool. It's very advanced, but this is again something I want to see people actually using, because
I mean, there's every year with these announcements, right? There's certain features that are just really like after the event happens and everyone goes hands on with the phone. What are the top 3 things that people are going to be talking about this year? It's going to be motion sense, second gen assistant, and the camera. I'm assuming those are going to be the 3 tent poles of the Pixel 4 announcement. I think we've already talked about the camera and motion sense. This thing, the second generation assistant, the big question is, will this actually change the way we use our phones? And that is a Boolean question. That's a yes or a no, in my opinion. I don't think that there's an in between there. I think that we're gonna naturally adopt this kind of way of being able to say, just continuously open Google Photos, show me photos of a dog, send that picture to my friend. Send a text saying it was great seeing you this weekend, whatever. Is that just gonna come naturally? Because Google are in the leaked ad that showed up this week, which we didn't even talk about that. There was also a leaked ad that showed up. I think maybe you did mention, I forgot, but in that ad, they're clearly putting this at the forefront. That this is going to be a kind of a bragging point about the Pixel 4. Do you feel like it's going to lean more toward gimmick, or do you think it'll lean more toward revolutionary new feature? What's your gut right now, based on what we've seen at I/O? And
it's I don't think we've gotten over the hurdle of talking to your phone in public. That is my biggest indicator of when voice technology becomes ubiquitous, when people are really fine just talking to their phone in public versus much preferring doing the private action of just tapping quietly. So
sure.
I guess
even talking to your phone privately too. I think that still feels awkward. I mean, I think that Siri is one of, if we're talking about the iPhone, I think Siri is one of the lesser used features on the iPhone. I think people don't use it very much at all. Maybe that's just because it's awful. But even on the Pixel, I feel like Assistant has kind of eclipsed the point of being useful, and it's eclipsed the point of where I feel like if I don't have it, I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah.
And I'm missing out, but it also doesn't feel like absolutely critical to the way I use my phone every day. If that makes sense.
Because at the end of the day, voice isn't the most efficient way to use your phone, and that's what people care about, moving fast. And I guess let's create a comparison. What's more of a gimmick? What's more revolutionary? Next gen assistant or Siri or motion sense? Excluding the face unlock stuff.
I don't know yet, but I think they're kind of in the same place. They're neither of them scream gimmick to me, but neither of them seem fundamentally innovative either.
Actually, the direct competitors, if you think about it, at the very high level, they are two different input methods, two different
Sure.
visions of how to use your phone.
Yeah, good point.
So, does Google want you to? Because everything can do with motion sense, you can do with Google Assistant. Like at a
Yeah.
very fundamental level, those three things can be done with voice command. Turn off my alarm, move to the next song, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So, is this Google being Google and doing two of everything?
I think
Or
if yeah, yes, but also I think they're trying to. I feel like this has been true since the first Pixel, where I think they feel like the phone is stuck in this box, and it seems like they're trying to break the phone out of the box. To me, I look at another thing like the Pixel stand, right? Like the Pixel stand turned the Pixel 3 kind of into a Google Home of sorts,
yes,
and a photo frame. So it's like I think they're trying to take what we have. We all carry these rectangles in our pockets, and trying to break it out of its just conventions in a way that actually might make sense. And like it's not they're not just gimmicky. I mean, like the LG like hand unlock thing or whatever. Like it's like they
yeah,
really
yeah,
are trying to think about like for instance, when you're in the car, right? And you want to change tracks, it might feel most natural to use motion sense. Or in that moment, there might be a lot of people in the car, and it might be weird to like wave your hand around. And so in
yeah,
that moment, it may make sense to tap on the screen and click the little next button. So it's like there are multiple ways of getting to the same thing, and in that, the phone is easier to use in a wider variety of contexts. And I think currently it is kind of stuck in a little bit of a box, especially the iPhone. I feel like the iPhone, maybe the most powerful phone, may have maybe 3 years ahead on processing power. But I feel like it's really stuck in a box of uh, user interaction via only touching the screen. Even Siri is not there on the iPhone. So really, the iPhone is just tapping, touching, and dragging, which has been what it was since the first iPhone. And I think Google is trying to experiment as much as they can. Obviously, Assistant has been one way. Solely seems like another, and now the next gen assistant is doubling down on what they've been doing and trying to see if I don't know. I just can't. I feel like I can't know until I have it. I feel like
yeah,
I won't know until I'm in that situation where for some reason it just feels more natural to wave across my phone than it does to tap on it and click next. I think most cases, driving, for example, it would feel more natural to wave and probably safer to
yeah,
wave than to try to fiddle with my phone and find the next button to skip songs. So yeah, I won't know the magic. That's kind of one of the things is with Google products is, especially with assistant things, you don't really know the magic until it happens.
yeah.
Um,
And
I mean, one of the examples of this, Ben talked about it actually this week. This is timely that we mentioned this. He was talking about his time with the Nest Hub Max, and he was talking about how after he set up Face Match, he walked into the kitchen and he looked at the screen, and it immediately popped up proactive reminder about something that was on his calendar. He didn't have to ask for that, and that's one of those moments of like, oh, like this is assistant thinking for me, and it's actually being a helpful kind of assistant. And you don't know how that's going to feel, and you don't know how that actually improves your life until it actually happens, and you don't miss that appointment because assistant reminded you of it. So a little bit
yeah,
of soapbox there, but
it's
I
it's
also do think that it's kind of Google. I don't know, like the Pixel has been a weird mixed bag of like well tested, useful features and some things that also feel very googly, like A/B testing, kind of just throwing everything in the wall to see what sticks, kind of things. Um, I feel like I feel like they wouldn't do it unless they did extensive testing and found that there were at least some ways in which it was magical and helpful. Um,
yeah,
I don't
it's
know. It feels like a big commitment. Like, are they gonna? I mean, another thing is Active Edge. So, I mean, that was one thing. Going back to the second generation Pixel, right? Or was it the first? No, it was the second. The second generation
Second.
Pixel added the Active Edge thing for activating the assistant, and that was one of those things that we beforehand, that was a big question mark. It was just like Soli is today. It was like, is this going to be a gimmick or is it going to be something useful? Is it going to actually make using my phone easier? And for me, the answer is it actually made using my phone easier, because I found that it was just the quickest, easiest, most thoughtless way to activate the assistant. For me, and I think for many other people too. Pleasantly surprised by that. And so I guess I'm just optimistic that we'll see people commenting and telling me how I'm so pessimistic on the show. I'm optimistic that motion sense and Soli is actually going to be useful. So
Yeah. Yeah. Motion sense. But yeah, back to assistant is in that regard, as both of these technologies can scale to other devices, query technology wise. That Google could obviously open up the Soli sensor, and
oh yeah,
I'm sure the next gen assistant stuff, however it works, will be on next year's flagship phones.
sure. Yeah, I mean, it'll
So
be interesting. I think Soli is like it could be a potential 3D touch situation where they're investing in it, but maybe it might end up finding a home somewhere else that's not the first product that it launched in. 3D
yeah,
touch first launched in, or Force Touch or whatever, launched in the iPhone first, but then it ended up being more useful on the Apple Watch.
yeah,
And maybe we'll see the same thing happen with Soli.
especially on smart home devices which have dedicated power sources and therefore bigger field of views in terms of power constraints, which I think all of us thought it would have launched not on the phone first. So that's a question.
Yeah, we also don't know how much power Soli uses.
Yeah, that's another thing. You need to use the phone through a day of normal usage to see what impact Soli has.
Yep. So yeah, Assistant was one of the things, and I also just touched on, I feel like the what's really interesting to me about kind of the Pixel 4 being positioned next to the iPhone 11, I think that the Pixel 4 has more Apple fan person appealing features than any Pixel before it. So not only is the Pixel 4, I think, the biggest upgrade year to year we've had
Absolutely.
for the Pixel, it's also bringing the 90 hertz display, which, as we've mentioned, Apple fans who've used the ProMotion on the iPad Pro, which is pretty much the only mainstream consumer product that has 120, OnePlus 7 Pro and some other phones have 90, obviously, but those are more niche than the iPad Pro, and also are not Apple things. So 90 hertz would, I think, especially appeal to Apple fans. The Soli radar sensor, which we've been talking about this whole show, the Trojan horse is that it's going to improve facial security more than anything, probably. And so that could mean that Google's face-based security might be better than the one that Apple's been including via Face ID on the iPhone 10, 10s, and now 11. And then the third thing is, we've really hit this hard, is the cameras. Like, if you remember, cameras were like one of the main reasons people would buy an iPhone over an Android phone. There has always been this negative stigma about cameras on Android phones, partly because there have just been much wider variety of Android phones that go way cheaper and way crappier in terms of hardware. And so, but there's always been in culture this stigma of Android phones having crappy cameras. There's been the stigma of, oh, there's this crappy photo you posted on Snapchat, you're definitely using an Android. And for the longest time, I think the iPhone did have the most user-friendly camera UX, and just the most consistent photography output for a while ago. I mean back before like iPhone 7.
Yeah.
Back when Android cameras were still very rudimentary, for the most part. So yeah, I just think that the Pixel 4 has so many things that Apple people would find appealing.
Yeah.
And just the timing of the fact that this is a very light year on innovation for Apple. It's very iterative. This might be the year that Google could appeal to Apple users. Even though in reality, that number of people is probably still going to be minuscule because
and it's the
Apple's
average.
ecosystem is a gravity well.
And if they're going to target anybody, surprisingly, I think that they're going to get more regular users to switch rather than people who would you would think would appreciate the technology of what
Sure.
Google is even more, which is the real conundrum, really. If you have the best technology and the people who would appreciate this innovation don't end up using your stuff.
One last note on Pixel 4. It's been really interesting to see how no one has talked about the bezels. The bezels are a complete non-conversation.
Yeah.
The top bezel is as big as the notch was last year, and no one cares. And it's fascinating to me.
What's also interesting is that last year, coming out of during the interviews that Google gave with people during the Pixel 3 event, they said something along the lines of, if we could have fit the bezel, basically they wanted to put the Pixel 3 XL's design on the Pixel 3. Something about sizing. I know Google gave a comment to some publication, and that totally did not happen. They totally went the other way. The Pixel 3 design was the one that ended up maturing and being this year's.
Yeah.
So that ended up being a real surprise.
I'm still waiting for Android phones to go without a bottom chin. Is that another thing that's like an Apple IP thing, kind of like what's it called, the vibration motor, what's it called, Taptic engine? Because I know that is an IP thing that other people can't copy. Do you think that the whole wraparound OLED LED situation is also an IP thing? Because it has not happened. It's not been copied yet.
Yes. It's very
Why has it not been copied yet? It's been 3 years, 2 years.
Especially since like Samsung owns the tech. Fundamentally, the underlying screen tech is by Samsung, and they have those panels themselves. But who knows why?
So yeah, that's everything. Nest Mini also hit the FCC this week. It looks like it confirms our wall mount report. It's kind of, we don't really know what's going on with the headphone jack. We're also, based on this, some people were saying it looked like this confirmed the headphone jack, but to me personally, it looks more like the other cutout on this FCC design is the mute switch that's already on the back of the Google Home Mini. But we feel pretty confident in our source that it will have some kind of aux in/out. So don't really know what to think about that. Could be an adapter or a dongle, which would not be surprising with 3.5 millimeter headphone jacks in 2019. And the Nest Hub Max launched this week for $229 at the Google Store. So Google's preempting itself a little bit there. Keep an eye out for our review on that tomorrow. What else? I guess the last thing I'll say before we close out the show for the day, unless you have anything else. We have some stories coming up in the next week. So not only will there probably be more Pixel leaks, maybe not from us, but we do have some more stories about things that Google is going to be doing next month at their October event. Keep an eye out in the next week or so. We were guessing that we would get invites today, but it looks like that's not happening. So yeah, keep an eye out in the next few days for invites to the Google event, so we know when all of this is going down. It's probably a good 4 weeks away. We'll be back next week just to talk more about Pixel 4 and all the other things. Hopefully, this is what I'm crossing my fingers for. Hopefully, this is Pixelbook 2 week. It's time. It's time for Pixelbook. Hopefully, we'll be able to dig some stuff up. But until next week, you can tune into Alphabet Scoop here on YouTube Live. Every week, we record this podcast every Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or whatever. This is Thursday edition, Alphabet Scoop Thursday edition. We'll publish on podcasting platforms such as iTunes and Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, and Google Play pretty soon after the show. And you can also listen directly over at 9to5google.com. This has been Stephen and Abner from 9to5Google, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Later.